Today I am going to be showing you how to use our disc cutter, our circle disc cutter in the classroom, as well as I'm going to be showing you a couple of other techniques on how to texture your metal and prep your metal for working in the classroom and adding some additional design elements. So to start, I'm going to be using a bench block, and we have these in the back of the classroom. I'm just going to be taking a thin piece of copper, which we'll be using with the enameling process. I'm going to take a thin piece of copper, and what I want to do to start is I'm going to actually measure the gauge of this metal, okay? So this is called a gauge plate, and these are in the blue cabinet behind me. And with this gauge plate, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take the metal and I'm going to put it in these gauges to see how thick it is. Now I can feel that this is a little bit thinner. So I started at 20 and I see that I made it to 22. And if I try to go to 23, I don't think it's gonna work because I really kind of struggle to get it out of 22, okay? So this is 22. The reason why I'm pointing that out is because when we are using the disc cutter today, you need to use metal that is 18 gauge or above, okay? So remember, our numbers kind of go backwards. So 18 gauge is actually thicker, and you can see that on the gauge plate, 18 gauge is right here, and then 20 gauge, as it goes higher with a higher number, the actual openings and the thickness of the metal gets smaller, okay? So this is 22 gauge. Okay, so this metal is good to go. And what I'm actually gonna do with this is I'm going to texture it, okay? Now, before I texture it, I'm going to get my goggles, okay? Because as I'm texturing the metal, whenever you're working with a brass mallet, when you're working with steel tools, there's always little shards of metal that could come off, both of what you're texturing, the stamps that you're using, or even the actual cutters with the disc cutter, okay? So I'm gonna put on my goggles. Okay, here's the piece of metal that I'm going to be texturing. And then I just have this fun box of stamps in the classroom that are different textures. It doesn't have to be something specific. I can just take something and kind of go with it. So I'm going to take a stamp that looks like this, kind of has like a little floral pattern to it. Okay, I'm going to put it on this is on the actual bench block. Okay, now too loud for you, we have earmuffs, and that helps with the sound, okay? Now, as you can see as well, and I'm going to show you with the disc cutter, okay, I also have these pads in the classroom that are just nice fabric material that has kind of a sticky back so it won't slide. Feel free to put those underneath as you're working on it so that it doesn't have that loud noise on the wood, okay? So I'm going to try it again so you can see the difference. Okay, much better, okay? Now, if you want to cut a disc that has texture on it, you want to texture it before you put it in the actual disc cutter, okay? Because what will happen is when you texture it, it work hardens our metal. So chances are if it gets really hard, we're gonna have to anneal it. And that's a different video that we have in class, but we're gonna have to anneal it so that we can re-soften it. So when we put it through the disc cutter, it will cut, okay? But if you wait and you texture your piece after it's already cut into a circle, what'll happen is it misshapes the metal. So now that perfect circle that you had once you textured, now it has all of these weird edges to it and it's no longer a perfect circle, which you could file away, but it just makes it more difficult for you, okay? So texture your metal first. If we have to anneal it, we can anneal that. We can watch the video. We're gonna do that with a project anyways, okay? But I'm going to finish a little bit with my texture. These little stars. Okay, and now you can see the texture on my piece, okay? Now, what I'm gonna do is I am going to save this, okay? I am actually going to use my disc cutter and show you how to use the actual disc cutter. So I have another piece of metal. Most of the metal I have in the classroom is labeled, so you can see this is 22. The C means copper, if you see that in one of my drawers. So it's a 22 gauge copper. And what I'm gonna do is I need to open up my actual disc cutter. Now, when I'm opening up my disc cutter for the first time, I'm just gonna grab a tool and I can put at the top here and twist off this top part. So what I need to do is I need to replace this part, and you can actually see on the side, it's opening. Okay, so it's actually opening for me to be able to work with it. And I'm going to take this off. This part will already be done for you, but it's good to see what goes into it. I'm gonna take this piece off so that I can put on my handle, so I can crank it open and closed really easily. Okay, so here's my handle. I'm gonna put it back on in the same spot. Okay, and now you can see when I crank this, you can see it getting closed more and more. Okay, that's how we're going to keep our metal in there. Okay, so I'm going to open this. Okay, I'm going to take my clean piece of 22 copper, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually put it in my disc cutter. Now, make sure when you're doing this to leave a good amount of space around where the disc cutter is. Around where the hole is going to be, because you want a little flange, you want a little opening there. If it's too close to the edge of the metal, when we try and hammer through, it will kind of mushroom the side of this. Okay, so now I have my piece of 22 gauge, so it's thin enough metal in my actual disc cutter. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look at our actual cutters. So these are our cutters, okay? And you'll notice what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, they might be kind of oily, that's okay. They keep them from rusting, that's how we clean them as well. This is one of my cutters. And you will notice there's a beveled edge, and then there's a straight edge. And what we're gonna do is we're actually going to cut with the straight edge, okay? And with that straight edge, it's gonna give us a nice, clean circle. The beveled edge is the side that we're gonna be hitting it. And beveled, you'll see it's on an angle. That's a good shot of it right there for you, okay? So I kind of guesstimated which one it was, too big. So I need to take a smaller one, and you just kind of have to guess which one it is, okay? So now I have that in there, okay? So I'm going to tighten this. Now, if the handle here is in the way of you hitting your piece, the last thing you want to do, we're going to be using this brass mallet. The last thing you want to do with this brass mallet is hit this and accidentally hit this centerpiece. Because if we hit this centerpiece, what's going to happen is, here, I'll change out my colors for you. If I hit that metal centerpiece, okay, what's going to happen is it's going to break, and we're not going to be able to rotate this anymore. And that's what actually happened on one of our previous ones. Okay, is we actually broke the top, so now it doesn't work, okay? And this is about $150. We can't just get replacement pieces for some of these things. So we need to make sure that we're taking care of them, okay? So that's why I'm teaching you how, so we don't have those mistakes, okay? So if my handle is too close to where I'm hitting, what I can actually do is press down on the button on the center, and I can move it around. Okay, so what I'm gonna do to move this so it's not too close is I'm gonna press down on this, and I'm gonna lift up that handle, and I'm gonna move it. Sometimes this can get tricky. There we go, I pushed it down, and then I pulled up on the handle, and you can see it's moving, but this is still in there tight, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this disc right here, which says 7/8 of an inch, okay? I'm going to put down my goggles. Okay, now, the reason why we are using a brass mallet, okay, is we wanna make sure it's strong enough to make the steel disc, the steel cutter go through our actual piece, okay? And with that, what happens, and you'll actually see some of the damage on here from using these previously, what happens is sometimes with this beveled edge, it will actually mushroom over. The more that you use these, that's why we always use the same end, that beveled edge, it'll mushroom over, okay? So we never ever want to cut on the sharp edge, because then we won't be able to use our actual cutters anymore, okay? With that mushroom edge, when it starts to round and this starts to damage, that's when small pieces of metal can fly off, which is why we have to wear our goggles, okay? I really should only take 2, maybe 3 swings at this, okay, to make sure that it goes all the way through, okay? So before I put on my headphones to hit my piece, okay, I wanna use some lube, some cut lube. So I'm gonna take this off, okay, push this up a little bit, it's like a push stick, okay? And to keep these in good shape, okay, what we're gonna do is with that sharp edge, I'm just gonna put some lube on there, okay? And what the lube does is it allows the metal, when it hits, to cut through without sparking, and allows it to flow through and get a clean cut, okay? I put that on there, put the cap back on my lube so it doesn't dry out. I'm gonna put on my headphones, take my brass mallet, the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it, where it'll only take 1 or 2 swings. But now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to twist this guy. Notice when I press down and I lift it up, it won't open it. When I just turn it, it'll open up, okay? I'm gonna lift up, push this all the way through, and sometimes if you don't lube it enough, that's when you have issues with that, okay? Now I take out my metal and you can see there's a lip all the way around, okay? But now I have a perfect copper disc, okay? Now, when I textured my metal, it did get a little bit work hardened. So what I would wanna do is even though this is really thin, if I try to use my disc cutter on this, I'm gonna be hitting it for a really long time. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna anneal it, put it in the pickle to clean, and then I'm going to make my copper disc. When you guys are working with enameling, if you make texture underneath the actual piece that you're working on, when you do the enamel, you'll get really cool designs and definition and color variations that go down into those textured areas. Now, if you want to make something that maybe has a specific center hole or have it look exactly the same each time, feel free, instead of just kind of winging it and hitting the metal where you think you have edges around, okay, feel free to use one of the circle templates in the actual classroom. So what you can do with this is you can take your piece of metal, okay? I'm going to take which cutter I'm going to be using. I'm just going to use the one I just did, okay? And with this, I'm actually going to take it and measure it. I know that it was 7/8, okay, so that I can see which one it fits perfectly into. Okay, so I got it right there. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm going to put this back over by my cutter, okay? Okay, you can see it on the actual metal. Instead of actually just taking this and tracing it around with a marker, which would mark this up, that's why we use this guy, okay? So then we can make sure we have the exact circle where we need it, okay? I put this over here, and then just take a permanent marker and I have those at the front, take a permanent marker and draw on the metal. So that then when I put this in my actual disc cutter, I can actually line it up so I see all the black on the inside, and I can make sure that I see no copper in there. That's when I know that it's cut in that precise spot, okay? Then once you cut it and you're like, I have permanent marker all over my piece, we just take some rubbing alcohol at the back of the room and we wipe it off, really easy. So that's how you get a precision cut if you want a certain circle or a smaller circle in a certain area. And that is how you use the disc cutter to create precise and clean discs of metal. I'm using copper here. We can use other ones as well, as long as they are soft enough and at a thin enough gauge, right? So 18 or above, about 18 to 25 is good. And then from there, the possibilities are endless. We do want to keep our disc cutter in really, really nice shape so that they last a while, because they are expensive. So if you start to notice that there gets to be rust on here, either on the cutters or on the actual body of the disc cutter, we can actually use WD-40, which is oil-based, right? So that this actually moves smoothly, as well as you can wipe that on there with Scotch-Brite or sandpaper to help get rid of corrosion and keep these really nice so that we can continue to use them. Good luck.